You may have seen a Pokémon that looks something like this. Its name is Honooguma, but it doesn't appear in any official Pokémon game. You can't find it in the anime either, nor trading card game or merchandise. If you scoured all 1,025 official Pokémon designs, you would not find a single one that looks anything like Honooguma. For all intents and purposes, this Pokémon doesn't exist. Well, technically, there is one game where it appears. It's November 22nd, 1997, at Nintendo's 9th annual Spaceworld event, where upcoming games and consoles are being shown off to the public. Much of the hype surrounding the event is focused on Game Freak's demo of the upcoming Pokémon Gold and Silver. Upon booting up the demo, players are randomly given one of 3 starters, which means 1/3 of players would make acquaintance with a Fire-type Pokémon named Honooguma. After Spaceworld, this demo would never be exhibited again. When Gold and Silver came out, Honooguma was nowhere to be seen. The Fire Bear now only survived through the memories of Spaceworld attendees and a low-res image of its sprite. If Nintendo and Game Freak had their way, Honooguma would be all but erased from the Pokémon franchise. All video games have content that was cut before the final release, known as proto or beta content. The gaming industry tends to guard this beta content fiercely, only leaking brief glimpses of what could have been to the public. Because of this, beta content represents some of the most elusive information in gaming. But even among a sea of fascinating beta content, few games are more coveted than that of Pokémon. And when it comes to Pokémon, the holy grail of development secrets is that of the beta Pokémon. Beta Pokémon are the mons that could have been. Sometimes there's but a single pixel of difference between a beta Pokémon and its final iteration. Other times, they're completely unrecognizable, or even absent from the final game entirely. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that these designs are among the most sought-after beta content in all of gaming. There's just one small problem. Nintendo. Nintendo is often regarded as one of the most litigious and copyright-obsessed companies in all of gaming, whether it be striking YouTubers for modding or sometimes just playing their games, fining Gary Bowser millions of dollars for hacking Switches, or frivolously suing Palworld for patent infringement. When it comes to their IP, Nintendo is the last company you want to cross. As you might expect, they're similarly proactive about countering leaks. If you're in the scene of Pokémon leaks, it's a bad idea to get too famous, else you risk Nintendo's wrath. Just beneath the surface of these beta Pokémon lies a heated war of information, and in war, neither side comes out clean. How much would you risk to get your hands on a beta Pokémon? Would you risk a prison sentence for them? For most people, the answer is a surefire no. They are, after all, just pixels on a screen. But for a man named Zammis Clark, the answer to that question was yes. On March 9th, 2018, Zammis hacked into Nintendo, stealing gigabytes worth of assets for various games and consoles. Among these, he also got away with hundreds of beta Pokémon and prototype Pokémon games, including the Spaceworld demo. Just 5 months later, he was arrested and charged by police. Nintendo was claiming damages of $1.8 million. Before Zammis was arrested, he entrusted the data he received with a small group of individuals, who were tasked with leaking said information to the public without suffering the same fate he did. In theory, being given some of the most prized beta content in gaming is a blessing, but in practice, these prototypes were cursed. Zammis had kicked off a cascade, and the closer you got to the eye of the storm, the more chaos would befall you. The insanity that followed would eventually culminate in one question for those spectating. What even is the Nintendo Gigaleak? But first, a word from my very first sponsor, Aura. This is the story of a best friend turned to the dark side, and one awesome sponsor. Your data is out there. It's more valuable than gold, yet cheaper than dirt, because that's how the biggest corporations in the world treat it. They'll sell it to anyone.
Dear God, how is this legal?
Even you could easily buy other people's data. Which is why we need today's sponsor, Aura.
Wait, really? It's that easy? I'm joining the winning side!
After that, Neon bought and sold all the information he could find, jumped on every data breach, until he became a millionaire. Nobody could stop him. Except me! Because I have Aura. He tried to find my information, but Aura had expunged every trace of it. He combed through every data breach hoping to find mine, but Aura is always vigilant. Aura can even find your data on the dark web, and alert you before it's too late. With Aura, hackers have nowhere to hide. How did Aura find him? Your tyranny has gone on too long, Neon!
Just try and stop me. Wait, where did you get a soap?
Use code Crunchybagels to get a 14-day free trial and secure your data today. That's aura.com/crunchybagels. Link in the description. And now, back to the video. Oh, one last shill. According to my analytics, you're probably not subscribed. You might want to fix that. It's free, and your support is what allows me to make these videos. Thanks! Our story begins on a website called Nemesis Temple, created by the titular Nemesis in November 2003. According to a later post by Nemesis, quote, "It was to become a general-purpose Pokémon and Yu-Gi-Oh site, with emphasis on the strange aspects of Pokémon. These strange aspects would primarily entail glitches." Despite their success, Pokémon Red and Blue are notoriously buggy games. Even basic mechanics were broken upon release. But while some glitches are relatively minor, others are completely game-breaking. Missing No is arguably the most famous glitch in gaming. With a specific setup, the player is able to encounter a placeholder Pokémon, appearing as a bizarre, faceless brick of garbled graphics. Its typing is normal and bird, with the latter not even appearing in normal gameplay, as the bird type was cut during development. But while Missing No is the best known glitch Pokémon, it's far from the only one. In fact, Gen 3 alone has glitch Pokémon numbering in the hundreds of thousands. But we're not quite that unhinged yet. Nemesis Temple was only the first in a lineage of Pokémon glitch-related sites that Nemesis would create. In February 2004, Nemesis Temple would be abandoned in favor of his new site, Professor Glitch's Laboratory. Along with it, he took on a new username, Abwayax. One part of his About Me at the time read, quote, "I'm only 13, but don't mess with me, because I'm probably more glitch smart than some of you over there." Over the next roughly 2 years, Abwayax would open site after site, each fixating on Pokémon glitches and each closing for various reasons. Over time, these sites would attract a niche but dedicated fan base, who congregated on forums associated with each site. The fans who grew closest to Abwayax would form the core staff behind the final site in the lineage, which he would end up running for more than 10 years. Glitch City Laboratories. Glitch City Laboratories, or GCL, was established in December 2005. Not long after, it would go public, then gain a forum. Named after the Glitch City bug from Gen 1, the site's content followed suit, providing users with in-depth information about various Pokémon glitches. Helping the site gain notoriety was its dexes, cataloging not just glitch Pokémon, but glitch moves and items across multiple games, seeking seeking to provide each entry with its own comprehensive article. The right to create and edit said articles was given to staff members. However, regular users could also submit their own articles through a submissions board, where they could then be given the OK by staff. If their contributions were considered valuable, they could be allowed to create articles without the need for approval. GCL would become Abwayax's most successful site to date, but fundamentally, it was still a niche website. The knowledge it featured was obscure, and contributing to it required technical know-how that few people possessed. Still, if you were the type of person who enjoyed perusing a catalog of every single glitch unknown in Gen 2, GCL was probably your favorite website. On March 18, 2006, a user by the name of Stackout, soon to be known as Wacko, would register his account on GCL at the age of just 11. He would post in the forums for the first time almost 3 months later, and from there became an active user, eventually netting a position as a comment moderator and site staff member. Stackout was autistic and lived in the UK. His technological knowledge was exceptional for his age, and his expertise would only grow with time. His staff page, archived on November 11th, 2007, reads as follows, quote, Stackout, aka Wacko, Wacko Kaus, Wacko ZMC, Wacko ZMC slash Kaus, Wacko ZMC slash Aya, Wacko Kaus slash Aya, Wacko ZMC slash Kaus slash Aya, the Distractor, the underscore Distractor, and T underscore D. Yes, Stackout has many nicks, used everywhere. He loves cracking software and games, so you can hand an oldish game to him and he will give it back to you after a while, able to be played without the CD in. He also loves writing poems and stories, and in various English classes he has wrote 2 stories involving Pokémon, with the opening of a 3rd. They all feature Jared, who got a Rhyhorn from his brother Nicky. After the first story, he disappeared, reappearing in the second only to be caught and trapped by a mysterious character called the Inspector. And in the 3rd, he actually saves his brother from another bad team, almost a copy of Team Rocket. He also loves computers, and can fix any software-related computer problems you have just by contacting him, on IRC, the forum, or otherwise. If you thought all those nicknames I listed back there were a bit much, don't worry! He has many more where that came from! But luckily, we don't have to use any of them, because Stackout's real name is Zammis, and in the 2010s, he would make headlines around the world time and time again. North Korea is a notoriously secretive country, and this extends to their native computer operating system, Red Star OS. In 2014, its newest release was Red Star 3.0, built from Linux Fedora 11. Being from North Korea, no one outside the country had access to it, or at least, that's how it was supposed to be. On June 1st, 2014, Zammis, under the username Slipstream, posted to r/Linux, quote, I managed to get a hold of the latest version of that North Korean Linux distro, in some shape or form. Here's a torrent of Red Star OS 3.0 server. The post came with a Pirate Bay link, which led to a torrent link and a readme. It begins with ASCII art reading out Red Star, before continuing, quote, Red Star OS 3.0 server x86 cracked. Don't ask me how I got this. I do not have the desktop version, just the server version. But since this is the first ever leak of Red Star OS server, and the first ever leak of Red Star 3.0, why aren't you thanking me already? Enjoy, Slipstream. P.S. You mad DPRK? If you like this, tip me Dogecoins. Though Red Star 2.0 had made the rounds years prior, the leak was still remarkable, and it would only grow even more so, because on December 29th, 2014, he would post to r/Linux once again, bearing the desktop retail version of Red Star 3.0 as opposed to the version meant to run on servers. This time, he linked a pastebin, which takes on a brazen and mocking tone towards Red Star and North Korea, sarcastically calling it Best Korea. Similar to his last leak, he asks to be tipped in Dogecoins, but this time, he also links an internet relay chat, or IRC, called Ring of Lightning, asking readers to discuss the leak with him there. Ring of Lightning was an IRC channel frequented by tech-savvy individuals, where zammis chatted under the name Rai-chan. Any questions people had about the nature of these leaks would be answered on January 12, 2015, when NK News would release an interview with zammis under the title "Hacker Claims to Have Cracked North Korea's Intranet." A sample of it reads as follows, quote, "NK News, what's the media attention been like so far? Slipstream. It's been good enough, I guess. It's a shame that I wasn't contacted more, especially with the link in the paste bin and readme. What were your motives for the hack? Was this a political thing or just for fun? I wanted to see if I could proxy through into DPRK's national intranet. Also, I got bored, etc. How did you go about getting hold of the OS? I actually got given it by, let's say, someone on Reddit, who I was contacted by a few months after I leaked server, completely out of the blue. You say you've been pulling data out of DPRK's ass since 2014. What other materials have you found? Is there more to come? I'd rather not talk about what other stuff I found, at least right now. I do have other things though, including what I think is source code for sites on DPRK's national intranet. It's a shame I never did proxy through to it, as judging by what I have, if I did, I'd probably have shells or root on most of the country. Reading between the lines, it can be gathered that zammis likely found the server version of the OS through his own hacking endeavors, while he was given the desktop version by a quote-unquote Reddit user. But what's more fascinating is his claim of just barely missing out on having root access on most of the country. Root access, or administrator privilege, is the highest level of control you can have over a system, and allows you to act nearly without restriction, including making alterations to the operating system itself. At just 20 years old, zammis had already obtained an absurd amount of power through his hacking abilities, but the way he wielded this power would get him in trouble time and time again. On February 12, 2015, the British government enacted the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act 2015. Yes, this is still a Pokémon video. It decreed, among other things, that by July 1st of that year, teachers would have a legal duty to prevent students from being radicalized into terrorism. Controversy ensued, but British company Impero Solutions wanted schools to know that they were up to the task. They were the creators of Education Pro, a classroom monitoring software designed to keep students on task while on school computers, and now to prevent online radicalization. On April 15th, in a now deleted blog post, Impero wrote about how Education Pro can catch radicalization as it's happening, using keyword detection and the ability to view everything students are doing on their screens in real time. As the July 1st deadline grew closer, Impero was gaining traction in the media, but this wave of attention would soon backfire on them. Education Pro had a glaring security oversight, and zammis had just made it public. On June 12th, he tweeted, quote, whatever, here's a proof of concept for Impero. Remote code execution as systems on all Windows clients. Yeah. It's bad. Linked in the tweet was a write-up he'd done on GitHub explaining how to hack into the monitoring system of any school using Education Pro. Quote, if you're unsure what Impero is, it's essentially a corporate/educational remote access Trojan. They recently were in the news about how they implemented anti-radicalization shit or something. They had a booth at BET back in January. They gave out donuts. Those were nice. Unfortunately, when I asked about their security, nobody answered me. Some reversing later, looks like Impero is completely pwned, am I right? He then goes on to explain how to do the exploit. Most egregiously, schools were being connected to Impero's servers with a default password of password. He ends off by saying, basically, if you use Impero, please don't. Oh yeah, free speech for the win, internet censorship is insert some expletives here, and so are any and all rats. The exploit would allow the user to execute malicious code on any device connected to the network. Due to the public way in which the exploit was revealed, Impero needed to act fast. They issued a hotfix, which Zammis immediately circumvented. He updated his exploit code accordingly, and wrote an email warning Impero that their systems were still vulnerable. In response, Impero threatened to sue him. On July 13th, Impero emailed Zammis a letter of claim through the legal firm Gately. They claimed that his actions had constituted copyright infringement, breach of contract, and breach of confidence. In the damages section, they write, quote, "You have enabled anyone to breach the security of our client's software program and write destructive files to disrupt numerous software systems throughout the UK. The loss and damage to our clients caused by your activities is significant and will in any legal action taken in the civil courts be the subject of applications to the court for restraining orders to restrict you from further copyright infringement and breach of confidence, as well as court orders for monetary compensation. In order to mitigate the damage caused to some extent, our clients require the immediate takedown of the GitHub gist posting, all relevant tweets by you concerning our client's software, and the removal from public view of all other material comprising confidential information about our client's software. We therefore await confirmation from you by 17 July 2015 that you have done this. Yours faithfully, Gately PLC." The press soon picked up the story. Though journalists disapproved of how Zammis publicized the exploit, they were largely sympathetic, framing him as a well-intentioned underdog being bullied by a large company. Initially, Zammis was unsure what he would do about the legal threat. However, he eventually acquiesced to Impero's demands, and nothing came of it. But while Zammis had gotten off scot-free this time, it was becoming clear that his pastime of hacking was ruffling the wrong feathers. The longer he evaded punishment, the more daring his hacks became. And soon, this would lead him to become the subject of global news on a scale he had not yet experienced. I'm of course talking about the vtech scandal. vtech is a children's toy company. 5 guesses as to what their gimmick is. Many of their toys rely on internet functionality, requiring parents to set up an account with them. What these parents didn't know, however, was how poorly protected not only their data was, but that of their children. In mid-November 2015, Vice motherboard journalist Lorenzo Franceschi Bicchierai was contacted by someone who claimed to have hacked into many of vtech's databases. The purported scale of the breach was enormous, but the most frightening aspect was the possibility of children's private data being open to the public. If this hacker was telling the truth, it would be one of the biggest cybersecurity scandals to date. So, Lorenzo sent the data to Troy Hunt, creator of HaveIBeenPwned.com, who was able to confirm that the breach was legit. vtech was about to face the music. After some struggle, on November 24th, Lorenzo successfully contacted vtech about the leak. They were unaware of the breach until Lorenzo's message, but after some internal investigation, they discovered it had occurred on November 14th. 3 days later, the story would go public. vtech put out a statement on their website acknowledging the incident, albeit in a manner that downplayed the true extent of the damage, making no mention of children's data being breached. On the same day, Lorenzo released his article. Immediately afterwards, Troy Hunt put out a blog post about the incident. Both were scathing. vtech encrypted their passwords using a method known as MD5, which is notoriously insecure and easily reversible. To make matters worse, the secret questions and answers used to circumvent the password in the event the user forgets it were stored in plain text, meaning you don't even need the password in the first place. This is not to mention that the leak allowed for children to be definitively linked to their parents. On top of this, they just generally had terrible web security, rendering infiltrating their systems a stunningly simple task. Yet somehow, it gets even more disturbing. One of vtech's products is the InnoTab line, a portable tablet that allows children to text other InnoTab owners, as well as their parents' phones, with the Kid Connect app. On November 30th, Lorenzo put out another article entitled "Hacker Obtained Children's Headshots and Chat Logs from Toymaker vtech." It's just as bad as the headline makes it out to be. While setting up their InnoTab profile, children are encouraged to take pictures of themselves. These images were stored in vtech's databases, which were now compromised. Children sent each other messages, which vtech stored, which were now compromised. Children could record voice messages to send to each other, which vtech stored, which were now compromised. Lorenzo quoted the hacker as writing, "I can get a random Kid Connect account, look through the dump, link them to their circle of friends, and the parent who registered at Learning Lodge, vtech's app store. I have the personal information of the parent and the profile pictures, emails, passwords, nicknames of everyone in their Kid Connect contacts list." That same day, vtech suspended their Learning Lodge app store and other affected websites. In the end, the data of over 6 million children were compromised, including their birth date, name, and gender. This is in addition to a plethora of information about their parents. Embroiled in the middle of this controversy was the hacker themselves, who was able to gain root access to vtech's web and database servers thanks to their garbage web security. And, oh my god, this just in, the hacker is Zammis Clark! Who would have guessed? Yet despite the horrific nature of the hack, to an outside observer, it was hard to call Zammis malicious. Lorenzo writes in his first article, quote, "On Friday, I asked the hacker what the plan was for the data, and they simply answered, nothing." The hacker claims to have shared the data only with Motherboard, though it could have easily been sold online. Zammis had apparently learned from the Impero debacle. In a later Vice interview, he claimed, quote, "I just want issues made aware of and fixed." He didn't take any public credit for the hack, asking to remain anonymous in the article, although he still couldn't help himself from posting about it on Twitter and Reddit, pretending to be an outside observer. But with the story gaining more and more attention, it was inevitable that interest would turn to who exactly was behind the hack. Even if his intentions weren't malicious, he had still committed a crime, and though he had avoided consequences in the past, his luck was about to run out. On December 15th, Zammis Clark was arrested by the Southeast Regional Organized Crime Unit, or SAROSU, for unauthorized access to a computer. At an unknown point, perhaps from the very beginning, Zammis confessed everything to the police. Well, I guess I spoke too soon about his luck running out. Miraculously, vtech did not want to assist in the prosecution. Possibly because they were being investigated by the FTC for their COPPA violations, which were only exposed because of Zammis himself. On November 1st, 2016, Zammis was given a formal adult police caution, meaning he basically got off with a stern talking to. For the second time, Zammis had been spared not only a prison sentence, but any punishment whatsoever. The story could have ended here, but it seems Zammis likes pushing his luck. While I've had to explain what Red Star, Impero, and vtech are, I doubt I need to do the same for his next hacking target. On January 24th, 2017, Zammis infiltrated a Microsoft server using an internal username and password. He then uploaded a type of malicious file known as a web shell, which is interpreted by a server as code, allowing the uploader remote access. With the use of more web shells, Zammis was able to scour Microsoft's network in secrecy. He eventually put his focus on pilfering a specific type of file, pre-release versions of Windows. In the end, he made off with approximately 43,000 files. Afterwards, Zammis told others about the hack through IRC, which allowed them to gain access to the servers as well. This included a friend of his from the UK named Thomas Hounsell. Hounsell was well known in certain tech circles for his research on developer builds of Windows, which he hosted on his website BuildFeed. He also frequented the Ring of Lightning IRC IRC with Zammis. Zammis went undetected on the servers up until March, when he uploaded malware and disappeared amid the carnage. For a few months, it seemed as if Zammis had gotten away with it, but this relative quiet wouldn't last. On June 22nd, for the second time, Zammis was arrested by Serosu. Since Hounsel also lived in the UK, he too would be arrested for the hacking. That same day, police put out a statement. Quote, Serosu arrest 2 as part of internal investigation into unauthorized access to the Microsoft N. A 22-year-old man from Lincolnshire was arrested on suspicion of gaining unauthorized access to a computer. A 25-year-old man from Bracknell was arrested under Computer Misuse Act offenses. The investigation relates to the unauthorized intrusion into networks belonging to Microsoft. Detective Sergeant Rob Bryant from Serosu's Cybercrime Unit, which led the UK warrants, said, "We are working closely with our colleagues in EMSO, Microsoft Cyber Team, the FBI, Europol, and the NCCU to investigate these offenses. This group is spread around the world, and therefore the investigation is being coordinated with our various partners. We've seized a number of devices. We are still in the early stages of this investigation, and will work with our partners to ensure that cybercriminals have no place to hide." From here, the hack and subsequent arrests hit the press. Despite their names being withheld, what information had been revealed immediately made Ring of Lightning suspect that the hackers were Zammis and Hounsel. Ring of Lightning was evidently not one of the IRCs let in on the intrusion, as its members were completely blindsided by the story. Well, everyone except one member. Amid the rest of the channel's surprise, Kotori explains that Zammis had informed him about the hacking to some degree, even handing him some of the loot, though he claims that at the time, he didn't know whether to believe Zammis. He also described an incident where Hounsel and a few other people were panicking after Microsoft blocked them from accessing, quote, Skype and whatnot. Though Kotori mentioned some others he thinks are at risk of arrest and theorizes about where the hacked information was hosted, in the end, there's no way to verify any of it, and to my knowledge, no one else has been legally implicated for the hack. Zammis was later G-lined by Kotori for cybercriminal activity, the maximum ban on IRC. He had been friends with the members of Ring of Lightning for years, and now he had just been banished from it. That same day, the Register reported that 32 terabytes of private Windows data was leaked onto betaarchive.com. The leak included pre-release builds of Windows, among other things. By August 13th, Zammis and Hounsel had been released on bail. Their G-line was also reversed, but they both still awaited trial. Oh yeah, this video's about Pokémon. Nearly forgot for a second there. Let's check back on Glitch City Labs as of 2017. GCL had now long switched to a wiki format. Despite how much time had passed, many members from the early days were still active, including Zammis, a testament to how tight-knit the community was. The site aged up with its users, now even sporting its own manual of style. This persistence led to arguably the most important change. Many of GCL's members had spent significant portions of their lives breaking apart Pokémon. Not only that, but knowledge of the game's inner workings had strictly improved since the site's youth. All of a sudden, GCL had found themselves on the cutting edge of Pokémon glitch research, and this would be demonstrated on January 10th, when a user would create one of the most notable posts on the entire site, obtaining Arceus via the Void glitch. Arceus is a Generation 4 Pokémon that is unobtainable through normal play. Though other unobtainable Pokémon had been found through glitches before, Arceus still eluded the community. Until Ganix came along. Ganix, otherwise known as Cryo, had recently returned to GCL on a new account after a more than 6-year hiatus from his old one. When he wasn't making goofy websites, he was breaking Pokémon games. The video he linked on the post demonstrating the glitch looks incomprehensible to the untrained eye, with seemingly arbitrary steps taken to encounter the legendary Pokémon. But beneath the surface, the strategy was nothing short of genius. On Ganix's prior account, he called himself the Tweak Master, which just so happens to be the first of 3 glitches he needed to find Arceus. How to tweak in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Step 1. Bike fast. Tweaking causes map data to be improperly loaded. By tweaking in a particular way, the player can activate the second glitch, voiding. The void is an out-of-bounds area with some unique properties, namely that walking in void alters your position in RAM. Since the map ID is read from RAM, with some planning, you can effectively teleport anywhere you want. These 2 glitches were already well known before Ganix's post, but it's the third glitch which was the most shocking, as it was the first documented instance of the retire trick. Retire is a menu option typically only available in one area in the entire game, the Pal Park, used to instantly leave said park. But if you can get the retire option to appear in any other area, clicking it will activate the 4th script of the map. Ganix alters the map ID to that of the Pal Park, gaining the retire menu option. Then, he changes the ID to the Hall of Origin, where Arceus resides. By doing things this way, he keeps the retire option even though the map ID has changed. The Hall of Origin only has 3 map scripts. However, the script in the second slot is actually loaded twice, appearing again in the 4th slot. And it just so happens that running that script causes this to happen. The community congratulated Ganix on his discovery. His video demonstrating the glitch also went viral, and currently sits at over 900,000 views. But this was far from the end of his glitch hunting endeavors. Namely, he and the community had their sights set on something else entirely. Arbitrary code execution, otherwise known as ACE. ACE may very well be the most powerful type of glitch there is. It allows the player to write their own custom code in-game and then run it. The most powerful ACEs even affect games outside of the one it was performed in. The most popular way to use ACEs is to insta-beat the game, but crazier implementations of it can involve playing Tetris in Pokémon. Obviously from the footage on screen, ACE in Generation 4 was eventually found, but in 2017, though all 3 prior gens had ACE, this was not the case for Gen 4. Finding ACE in Gen 4 was the current holy grail of Pokemon glitches, and Ganix thought he had an in, what he dubbed the Cascade Glitch. The Cascade Glitch utilizes a form of tweaking named for its chaotic and unpredictable results. Typically, it results in either a crash or the complete deterioration of the game. But Ganix believed that if the glitch's power could be properly harnessed, it could be the gateway to Gen 4 ACE. The possibility tantalized the community. After all, arbitrary code execution is where all your dreams come true. But beneath the surface, a different kind of cascade entirely was brewing. On March 9th, 2018, Zammis Clark, while on bail, hacked into Nintendo's servers. Knowing the likelihood of being caught, he distributed the loot to a few select groups and people. Zammis, and those he chose, now had full reign to decide when the cascade would commence! In early 2018, few beta Pokemon were known to the public, and of those, only a tiny fraction were from the Generation 2 1997 Spaceworld demo. You know, that thing I talked about all the way back in the intro. Though some footage of it exists, the most widely spread source of Spaceworld knowledge was these drawings. It's a common misconception that these are official Game Freak concept art. In actuality, they're almost certainly from a fan who played the Spaceworld demo and shortly after drew the Pokemon they saw. Consequently, these are actually slightly misremembered versions of their designs. Even our old friend Honooguma's looking a bit off. The Spaceworld demo felt impenetrable. It was known only through whispers and memories, with little being concretely known. Until Zammis got his hands on it. Pret is a Discord server dedicated to disassembling and decompiling Pokemon games, the act of taking machine-ready code and reverse engineering it into a more human-readable format. On May 26th, Zammis, under the name posted in hashtag #PokeCrystal, quote, "I heard you liked protos," immediately followed by a Firefox send link which contained both the gold and silver Spaceworld 97 demos. The link was set to automatically expire after 20 downloads, which message history suggests took less than an hour. One of these 20 downloads went to a member named Sainqui. Sainqui is a respected figure in the prototype community. Most notably, they're an admin on the Cutting Room Floor, or TCRF, a wiki dedicated to researching cut content from video games. Sainqui would later write about the event, quote, "It was an afternoon and I was at an event with our friends. The event was just about to end when a friend sent me a link and told me to download it immediately. I was busy, but it took only one screenshot to convince me to do so. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was the prototype. I remember that just a few weeks before then, I was telling people about the rough development Gold and Silver has seen, and how I would give a kidney for a prototype. And here it was, right in front of my eyes. I remember how I sat on my laptop there simply coordinating and working on this while my friends were packing things around me. Eventually, I was basically surrounded by boxes. But I insisted, this is really important." Nobody knew the identity of the leaker, nor the illegal truth of how he'd obtained the Spaceworld demo. Steadily, Pret members would join the channel, realizing that something historic had just occurred. But to those lucky few who downloaded the demo in time, Sainqui wanted to get in touch with you. With a prototype this coveted, Sainqui wanted it to have a proper release. This led to a decision that would soon prove controversial. Sainqui wanted to temporarily hoard the Spaceworld demo. Hoarding refers to withholding video game prototypes and related information from the public. It's also VP's favorite word. The term implies selfish intent, but not all hoarding is the same. In this instance, Sainqui wanted to form a team who could comb through the demo to discover and document all the important information it contained. Then, all this information could be listed on places like TCRF for ready consumption. But why does all this need to be done before its release? Why not after? Well, it was to fight the greatest evil of all. YouTubers. Despite our fancy editing, YouTubers are far more adept at spreading misinformation than its counterpart. Those on Pret wanted to break the story before, you know, the YouTubers could pull a normal one. So, Sainqui started up a new, private Discord server to coordinate a release in secret. Quickly, recipients of the demo and other trusted members were invited. Together, they formed what would later be known as Team Spaceworld. A Team Spaceworld member named Marcus later wrote that if it took longer than a month for them to prepare a public release, he planned to leak the ROM himself. So, the deadline is roughly June 26th. How much could go wrong in 1 month? May 27th goes well. Many new team members are added to help speed the project along. Even Zammis, on his leaker account, is a member of the server, and is in on their plan to keep the demo under wraps. Weather update, there's a leak. It's on 4chan's Pokemon board, VP. Here, an anonymous user posts a screenshot of the player in their bedroom. They then write, quote, "That's all I feel comfortable with leaking right now. I don't have it." Someone else posted these images privately. "I can't even be sure myself that it's the real thing. Please don't let this spread too much or they might not release it. It will be a big scene release. I heard it would take about a month to release. You didn't hear this from me." Immediately after, the first beta Pokemon from the demo would be leaked, as they posted Honooguma's sprite displayed in crisp detail for the very first time. Even as more screenshots were posted, many in the thread were skeptical of the leak's legitimacy. Just what was going on? Apparently, screenshots from the demo were being passed around privately. The thread's OP happens to be in one of these private chats, and in their excitement, decided to publicize them. But paradoxically, OP would continue to reiterate, "Don't let the news get too big." But apparently, Saintqui also had a hard time keeping quiet. On the 27th, they had tweeted, quote, "If you're a Pokemon fan, me and a group of people got our hands on something tremendously valuable. Release is on the horizon." Once VP discovered this tweet, the consensus became that the leak was legit. Immediately, a rumor begins that the demo originated from a recently deceased Japanese collector. According to the story, part of said collection ended up in a shop in Hokkaido, which then shipped them out for the contents of the cartridge to be dumped, which were now about to be leaked online. Of course, since the story was unsubstantiated, most people dismissed it, immediately bought it hook, line, and sinker. Soon, it spread so far that its source was effectively obfuscated. To its believers, this collector was another filthy hoarder to get mad about. Saintqui tweets, quote, "A bit of a more formal announcement. We have a well-known demo on our hands. Documentation is in progress and a release is planned in 1 month with a full English translation patch. But the replies indicate that people already knew what was up. Contrary to OP's wishes, the news had spread, and it would only continue to do so. Soon, a second leaker joined the thread, but this time, they had something that nobody had ever seen before. Even in footage of the event. A beta sprite of Pichu, looking much rounder than it does in the final game. A new thread was started. However, the first thread's OP had joined this one, uncomfortable with how quickly the news was spreading. Quote, "Guys, please don't make this a regular thing. I've seen dudes on Twitter posting about this now. We don't want this to get out because it could jeopardize the release of the ROM." This did little to stop the spread. An anonymous poster leaks the Super Game Boy border for the Silver demo. The hype keeps building. At this point, pressure is mounting within Team Spaceworld. The leaks are becoming a problem. But there's nothing they can do but keep on researching and pray nothing goes wrong. It's now May 31st, and VP is 4 threads deep into discussing the demo. An anonymous user says, quote, "It's real, by the way. I've seen a good chunk of the sprites. I don't have it myself, so ask me whatever and I'll answer you to the best of what I got a shot of." Someone replies with one of the aforementioned sketches from the fan who attended Spaceworld, depicting the water starter Kurusu, which was cut from the final game. Out of curiosity, the poster asks, "How accurate is this?" "Not accurate. That's a fake." Or so they replied. But as it turned out, they were lying about having the sprites, because 20 minutes later, a different Anon posted this image. The sketch, although slightly misremembered as expected, was by and large accurate. They then posted an image of them fighting an early design of Happa, previously seen in Spaceworld footage, though this also revealed the back sprite of Kurusu. But as they kept on posting, it became clear that something was different about this leaker. They had the ROM, and they seemed more than willing to share its contents. Beta Girafarig's front and back sprites leak, though once again, it's a Pokemon we had sketches and footage of. A presumed Team Spaceworld member writes, "I know we're all excited, but please hold off to avoid putting the project, team, and source at risk. Just in case, we only have to wait a month, so please respect the people involved. Fuck off. Dump it now." Another team member writes, "It's not necessarily a month, it's only up to a month. We're going as fast as we can, but by posting early leaks, you basically spoil the results of the disassembly. Mr. Edgelord, Please think about what you're doing. Their pleading did little to dam the flow of information. Next, they posted more honooguma pictures, and claimed they were trying to evolve kurusu but having difficulty doing so, now resorting to cheats. Someone, perhaps a Team Spaceworld member, replies to them, "Not having the kurusu evo? Get a load of this fucking guy," along with a headshot of kurusu's evolution. Aqua, looking rather smug. Soon, the leaker who was trying to evolve his kurusu updated the thread to show he was successful. The OP of the first thread chimes in. "I guess this is all, my fault. Or at least, people wouldn't have been inspired to post more leaks if it weren't for me posting the original thread. Again, sorry to the team. I was just an outsider who coincidentally stumbled upon it. Didn't think things would turn out like this. That being said, I'd rather play it now than later, so I'm okay with this outcome personally. Sorry that I'm a dick." Kurusu's final evolution, Aquaria, gets posted next. In the same post, the leaker writes, "Where to upload? Multiple anons recommend mega.nz. Another presumed Team Spaceworld member writes, "He clearly has access to the ROM. We're powerless to do anything at this point. He's going to drag this out and possibly publish the ROM." And then, Team Spaceworld gives in. Seeing that the full demo being leaked was inevitable, Team Spaceworld member Glitterberry writes, "I guess we have no other choice then. Here's all the documentation we've done so far. Please source it back to us if you post or write about it." She links a Google Sheets page containing all their research thus far, then continues, "Text is still being dumped, so there's not a script translation yet. But it's coming. Have fun, y'all." Exactly 24 seconds later, the leaker posts a mega.nz link containing the Pokemon Gold demo with the caption, "Have fun! Fuck waiting a month." But there was one consolation for the team. While the Gold demo had been leaked, the Silver demo was still safe in the hands of Team Spaceworld. They just needed to keep hold of it. The OmniArchive Discord server is a community dedicated to finding and preserving lost Minecraft versions. Two of the members, Zunaka and Rufus 10, were also members of Team Spaceworld. Immediately upon the Gold demo being leaked, Zunaka bragged to the server about his and Rufus's role in the ordeal. However, Zunaka was under the mistaken belief that the Silver demo had already been leaked. Because of this, he accidentally let slip that he had silver, and the public didn't. A rather infamous server member named Hans smelled blood in the water, and swiftly began blackmailing Zunaka in DMs. According to Rufus, this was done using IRC logs from the hashtag Minecraft channel in 2009. At some point, Zunaka had received these logs from a user of the IRC named DBN. In this channel, Minecraft players would chat with Notch about the game. The logs were obtained for research purposes, as this was very early into the game's development. But it was DBN's wish that the logs were withheld from the general public, as releasing them would pose a privacy risk for those in the channel. Hans had obtained these logs, and threatened to publicize them if Zunaka didn't give him the Silver demo. After some time, Zunaka caved. Hans immediately leaked it on OmniArchive, and from there, it made its way onto 4chan. The person who posted it to 4chan, also a member of OmniArchive, explained the Hans situation colorfully, characterizing him as someone who, quote, always gets banned by lying, griefing, and generally being an ass. Ironically, upon hearing this, those on the thread lauded Hans as a hero. Many on 4chan were bitter towards Team Spaceworld for what they saw as hoarding the ROMs. Some even believed that were it not for the people who leaked it early, the public would never have received the demo at all, instead predicting that Team Spaceworld would have smugly lorded it over the general public in perpetuity. One post that captures the sentiment at the time reads, quote, Hans is a god who was liberating info from a who wouldn't share it. For giving Hans the Silver ROM, Zunaka would be removed from the Team Spaceworld Discord, and despite the sacrifice, DBN IGN's logs are now public. TCRF put up a page documenting the demo, and the site received so much traffic that the servers began imploding under the strain of it all. From there, news of the demo spread far and wide. When all was said and done, it was by far the largest Pokémon leak up to that point. Of the 100 Pokémon newly added in the demo, over half were either completely removed from the final game or featured significant design tweaks. Shortly after the release of both the Gold and Silver Protos, the previously vague group that sought to give them a proper release would officially rebrand to Team Spaceworld. Although their attempt at giving the demo a proper release had failed, the future seemed bright for Team Spaceworld. They were still working on the translation patch for the ROMs, but more importantly, Zammis, now christened Mystery Man, was still on their side. He had more to share, and he was willing to give their community the first crack at it. Publicly, things would quiet down in the proto scene for the next 8 months, but beneath the surface, big things were happening. These oddities would culminate in an event that would irreparably shatter the already tenuous bond between VP and the main figureheads of the Pokemon beta community. I'm of course talking about the Pokethon incident. On August 12th, 2018, Zammis would post to the Team Spaceworld Discord for the final time. On August 14th, he would go dark on Mastodon, his most active online presence. Slowly but surely, people in GCL would pick up on his absence and wonder what exactly had happened. His newsworthy exploits had yet to be known. While those in GCL had seemingly lost a friend, Team Spaceworld had lost their source, but not all hope of them receiving more development material was lost. It was known, albeit vaguely, that he had given most of his remaining loot to backup people, including some within Team Spaceworld. Even the Team Spaceworld members themselves weren't precisely sure who among them had received this loot, nor how much had been given away. However, one of those people was about to reveal themselves. On September 12th, Ganix released a never-before-seen ROM of Pokemon Yellow to Team Spaceworld, containing debug features developers used for testing. Just 6 days later, ditto for Pokemon Blue. Evidently, he had a thing for debug features, because 2 months prior, he had also sent at least one other Team Spaceworld member a patch he'd made to re-enable leftover debug features in Japanese Pokemon Crystal's code. At an unknown point, a few other materials leaked on Team Spaceworld, including screenshots of some development ROMs and some documents. These were most likely shared by Zammis and Ganix. In addition, around this time, debug ROMs for Pokemon Gold and Silver are alleged to have been passed around in private through DMs by Team Spaceworld members. Team Spaceworld was now privately hoarding many of Zammis's materials, and even the server's own members had no idea who among them had what or when they were supposed to release them. On February 16th, 2019, the Team Spaceworld Twitter posted, quote, "Keep an eye on pokethon.net in a day and a half. Is it never before seen stuff? Only one way to find out. By which we mean yes." And just like that, the next leak was happening. Helixchamber is a group of fans dedicated to documenting the origins and development of Pokemon. The group was founded by Orchid and Catstorm on May 17th, 2018, in response to the release of Satoshi Tajiri, the man who made Pokemon. This manga, among other things, officially revealed some beta Pokemon designs, which Helixchamber immediately set to analyzing. Over the next 9 months, they would build an extremely positive reputation for themselves, starting as a Twitter account before creating their website. Most remarkable in my opinion is their series of articles on the internal index order of Gen 1 Pokemon. They would also gain many new members, with their core team eventually numbering 5, in addition to a number of guests. Some of these members, including Orchid and Catstorm, were also part of Team Spaceworld. However, throughout most of its life, Helixchamber had been hiding a secret. secret. In the very early days of the organization, Zammis had given them the sprites of 3 Gen 1 beta Pokémon. Shortly afterwards, he disappeared, which helixchamber assumed at the time was due to receiving a cease and desist from Nintendo. For the next month, one of their members searched desperately for anyone who had received the rest of the Gen 1 sprites, until finally, they were approached by someone who claimed to have them. Helixchamber was skeptical at first, so they put them through a series of tests that would prove they were the real deal. The leaker passed every single one with ease. Helixchamber asked for the files, but the leaker was only comfortable giving out interpreted assets, meaning they were given in common file formats such as PNG and TXT instead of their original form. Among the assets were many things, but the most important were the back sprites of Gen 1 beta Pokémon. Gen 1 has infamously poor sprite work.
Satoshi! Don't try the Johto Fen!
This is especially true for the back sprites. Due to their low resolution, many of them are barely even discernible. Front sprites would certainly be more valuable, but during development, Game Freak had optimized their front sprites, a process that erased the unused ones. The back sprites, which didn't undergo this optimization, were all the leaker had left. Because of this, many of these Pokemon's true appearances, as well as their names, were unknown. Based on the back sprites, as well as some leftover data, helixchamber set to work on theorizing what these Pokemon may have looked like. One helixchamber member helping with this effort was Racy Beep, best known for her Sugimori-style drawings of beta Pokemon. She was also going to appear at Pokethon 2019, a streaming event ran at the time by Abby Abra, where people play Pokemon games for charity. She was supposed to play Team Spaceworld's English translation of the Spaceworld demo. However, the translation was running slightly behind schedule, so Racy floated the idea that instead of running Spaceworld, she could run a ROM hack containing all the Gen 1 beta assets as a fun way to reveal them to the public, as well as raise some money for charity. The rest of helixchamber agreed, and the ROM hack entered development. But for this hack, back sprites alone wouldn't cut it. So, Racy and some others went about fabricating Pokédex entries, names, and other such things for the Pokemon. Most importantly, they gave them front sprites based on what could be deciphered from the back sprites. Out of necessity, these front sprites took significant creative liberties. A notable example is the fan-named Ribito and Crocozuna. Helixchamber interprets them as sumo frogs, but the back sprites contain so little to work off of that they could really be anything. Next, they needed someone to code the thing. So, they enlisted the help of Mura, who would be the project's sole programmer. So, what are Mura's credentials exactly? Mura doesn't exist. Well, okay, he does, but according to Racy herself, it's merely an anonymous pen name. Paradoxically, Mura fully intended to travel to the Pokethon Hotel and appear on stream, in person, with Racy to help present the hack. The idea was an interactive presentation, and seeing as he was the only programmer, he would have the best idea of how everything in the hack worked. So, Mura spent entire weeks prior to the event planning his commentary. So, this was it. Team Spaceworld may not have been able to give their namesake a proper release, but a few of its members had a shot at redemption. This was their chance to prove VP and its fear-mongering about hoarders dead wrong. But there's a problem. Due to both a power outage at the hotel and a concert going on nearby, Racy's time slot is pushed back from midday Eastern Time on February 27th to midnight on the 28th. For people in America, this meant staying up late on a Sunday night, and for Europeans, waking up early on a Monday. For most people, it was likely better to skip the stream entirely. But this leads to another problem. Team Spaceworld's tweet a day and a half before the event. Though vague, it promised never-before-seen content. For some, it was worth it to stay up late or wake up early to witness Pokemon history, but this also meant that the stream had to deliver in a big way, else its sleep-deprived viewers would become apoplectic. But there's another problem. There just isn't enough time for Mura to finish the ROM hack. It's extremely unstable, with some bugs even corrupting save data. In order to present the hack at all, Racy will need to save frequently and deliberately route the game in a way that avoids the worst of the glitches. The hype for the event just keeps building. 1 hour before Racy is set to stream, helixchamber tweets, quote, "Our own @RacyBeep is about to totally stream Spaceworld at Pokethon and definitely nothing else in 1 hour. The run will last for 3 hours, followed by a post here and an article on our website for a normal Spaceworld demonstration. So if you have questions about that, hold them." So, people wait an hour, turn on the stream, and...
No, please.
there's yet another problem. The streamer scheduled before Racy was running late, and he fully intended on finishing his run of Pokemon Platinum, regardless of it eating into Racy's time slot. 70 minutes passed, and he was still playing. A thread begins on VP, picking up where the Spaceworld threads left off. The first post starts off, quote, "Welcome back, plus shitty Twitch stream edition." VP is pissed. 80 minutes past schedule, the Platinum runner finally finishes the game. The stream plays some ads, followed by a screen saying, "We'll be right back." The situation isn't ideal, but at least the beta content is coming soon. But there's another problem. Because the Platinum runner had taken so long, a VP user allegedly doxed one of the Pokethon attendees' family. Though the dox itself has seemingly been lost, a good thing for the record, the effects it had on the stream have not. Chat moderation was kicked into absolute overdrive. According to a chat I had with Abby-Abra, 4 people were on laptops in another room, insta-banning 4chan users. Racy would later write that even her mom was banned in the crossfire, despite only being there to support her daughter. Not only that, but behind this "We'll be right back" screen, yet another problem is unfolding. On the Pokethon livestream, the camera showed talent occupying a couch and some seats. Mura intended on taking a seat here. However, he'd spent so long mulling over what he'd say on stream that he'd neglected to tell her this plan. So, Racy was under the false impression that Mura was simply going to watch off-screen. Furthermore, according to Mura, Racy did not choose who sat next to her during the stream. Every seat, including the couch seat, had already been taken, with the exception of one left over. Organizers asked the room if anyone wanted to take the spare seat, but before Mura could speak up, their musician announced that he would take it. Mura was extremely nervous in the lead up to the event. This was compounded by the stream allegedly reaching 8,000 live viewers around this time. Though Mura wanted to kick the musician out of his spot, he had hesitated so long that the stream had resumed, and he was unwilling to kick him out of his seat on camera. It's also worth noting that in a later thread, helixchamber would claim that a quote, "backup player" had to leave due to delays. Assuming this is Mura, it may have been yet another factor contributing to why he didn't appear on stream, though to my knowledge, Mura himself has never cited it as a reason. It is confirmed, however, that Mura would soon leave the venue mid-stream, barely able to hold back tears. He had toiled on this ROM hack for so long, yet he would play no part in revealing it to the world. Later, he would write that he deeply regrets not taking the seat, as soon, all his work would crumble before him in a far more tragic way. However, Mura's absence sets up a new problem. In order to keep the hack from leaking, Racy had waited until the last possible moment to inform staff that she wasn't running Spaceworld. Because of this, nobody else on stream knew the true nature of what she was running. The onus now fell solely on Racy to explain the hack properly. This task is made more difficult by the fact that aside from a few cheeky hints otherwise, the segment had been advertised as a Spaceworld stream. In order for people to not feel lied to, Racy would need to muster all the charisma she could. Concurrent to all this, helixchamber is hyping people up. They tweet, quote, It's time for the commercial break. You know what that means. Who's that Pokemon? It's here that they show the silhouette of a Beta Zubat pre-evolution, which immediately makes its way onto VP. Some 90 minutes behind schedule, Racy finally appears.
Okay, so this requires like a little bit of an introduction and an explanation because it's not like a typical run like you would, you know.
She's visibly nervous and finding it difficult to speak clearly. She claims multiple times that the stream will be educational, but the following segment is anything but. The intended joke of the segment is a play on an old rumor that Japan's Pokemon Green version was an entirely different game from America's Red and Blue. She pretends that she's going to play an authentic, translated copy of Japanese Pokemon Green. Then, when she begins playing, the beta twist will be revealed. However, her anxious tone did little to sell the bit, and those who expected a Spaceworld stream are now fuming. The nature of the stream is clarified somewhat as beta elements appear. Some viewers speculate that this is a genuine prototype cartridge. However, it quickly becomes clear to most that what she's playing is far too complete to be such. The prevailing theory becomes that this is a ROM hack, which is objectively true, though individual opinions on how much of it was real varied. However, due to the heightened moderation, people who post that it's a ROM hack in chat are banned. Furthermore, Racy keeps insisting that it's a real copy of Pokemon Green. Because of this, viewers suspect that Racy is deliberately trying to pass off the hack as real. And since the other people on the couch knew just as little as chat, intentional or not, that's effectively what happened. According to her testimony, Racy repeatedly checked her phone throughout the segment, looking for a cue on when to drop the act. She never received one. Thus, the facade continued for the entire stream. Though the pace starts off slow, as the stream progresses, more and more previously unknown beta Pokemon get revealed. Where this gets problematic is that the fan-made front sprites, names, and Pokédex entries are taken by some as legitimate beta content, when in reality, only the back sprites were real. This murkiness and significant amount of fan content leads to the single most damning moment of the stream, one that some believe may constitute a crime.
Okay, so donate at least $5 with a number between 1 and 186, and I will show you that dex entry.
Ooh.
Racy came up with a donation incentive on the fly where viewers could donate $5 to see a particular Mon's Pokédex entry, which includes their front sprite, but not their back sprite. Many viewers donated believing it would let them see genuine beta content. In actuality, every single element on the page was a fabrication. For already skeptical viewers, this was the nail in the coffin. In their eyes, it was outright fraud. So, yeah, this stream went about as disastrously as humanly possible. To put it mildly, in the midst of all this, helixchamber attempted to ease concerns over Twitter. When the segment finally ended, they tweeted, quote, "Well, I suppose you're all due for an explanation." They then explained how they'd obtained the leaked goods and what exactly was authentic. But importantly, the thread contained multiple deliberate lies. This was, in their eyes, to, quote, protect the source. One of these mistruths was, quote, "We pushed to get dumps of these prototypes, but they wouldn't budge on that. We assumed they were a collector and wanted to keep the value of what they had. But apparently recent events inspired them to at least give up some details of what was within the games. In reality, there were no prototypes, with the assets instead being found in Gen 1 source code, and the leaker was hardly the collector helixchamber made them out to be. But to VP, who reviled hoarders, this was yet another detail to be infuriated about. helixchamber then leaked the assets under the used.surf domain. Used.surf is now defunct, but back in the day, it was a joke website in which any Gen 1 Pokemon could be depicted surfing by changing the subdomain, including Missing No. but the page helixchamber had linked under rhydon.used.surf instead led to a zip of all the prototype assets they'd received. Along with this, they released an article entitled, "What Dreams May Come: Prototype Data for Pokémon Red and Green," detailing their preliminary analysis of the prototype assets, with the promise of more articles on them in the future. However, this article confirmed that much of the ROM's content was fan-made, solidifying people's ire. To make matters worse, though the article left out most of the fan-made material for clarity, it kept the fan-made names. Immediately, a downpour of negative comments rained down upon their website. That same day, the article was updated, removing fan-made names and interpretations, as well as apologizing for the stream, but this did little to quell the backlash. An irreparable rift had formed between VP and many of the figureheads of the beta Pokemon community, and the prime target for 4chan's hatred was none other than Racy herself. To heighten tensions further, though both Mura and helixchamber had apologized repeatedly for their part in the fiasco, Racy, feeling she was being unfairly targeted, seemed unwilling to do the same, even months later. But for VP, the most important thing gleaned was that, according to one of helixchamber's lies, a real prototype green ROM was out there. This realization spurred a new series of threads with the intention of figuring out who this collector was. Unfortunately for them, this collector wasn't real, and tweeting at Nabogasawara wasn't going to do anything. But if they had looked just a little harder, they probably could have figured out who the real leaker was. Because as it turns out, the answer was hiding in plain sight. All you had to do was ask one simple question: who owns used.surf? But before I answer that question, there's something up with Mura. In a VP Q&A, Mura revealed exactly why the front sprites weren't present, which is something even helixchamber claimed to not know. On another thread, he leaked Pokemon's old slogan, "Catch 'em if you can." Mura would eventually release the Pokethon ROM to download and play. Hidden within it was a previously unknown Beta Super Game Boy border that was absent from the zip file entirely, yet seemed authentic. It was almost as if Mura and the leaker were the same person. The smoking gun was that the Pokethon ROM's debug features were accessed the same way they are on real Pokemon debug carts, pressing select on the title screen. And if you recall from the beginning of this chapter, there's one person who knows a thing or two about Pokemon debug ROMs. Well, I suppose you're all due for an explanation. In many ways, Ganix and Zammis are mirrors of each other. Both are old users on GCL who remained active in its modern era. Both are autistic, and most importantly, both hyperfixate on cybersecurity, even making it their careers. Perhaps it was this similarity that allowed them to get along so well. Well enough that 4 days after Zammis hacked Nintendo, he contacted Ganix and entrusted him with some of the files. Ganix didn't know for a fact how the files had been obtained, though his use of the phrase "for a fact" in some statements implies he may have had an inkling of the truth even early on. Zammis's goal was for most of the files to be leaked publicly. However, Ganix had reservations about the legality of doing so, especially considering Nintendo's litigious track record. To Ganix, publicly leaking raw, unaltered data was off the table. What he was comfortable enough with was releasing interpretations of that data. Thus, the Pokethon ROM was born. Of course, if Ganix was gonna pull this off, he could not be publicly connected with the leaks, so he lied. Publicly, he pretended to be a spectator to everything as it came out. Mura who? I dunno, but apparently he put some secrets in the Pokethon ROM I totally didn't know about. If you weren't one of a select few people he told in private, you were none the wiser to Ganix's involvement. There was just one small problem. Zammis had gone MIA. It can be assumed that on or shortly after August 14th, Zammis was arrested for the third time, although surprisingly, I haven't been able to find any news reports of this happening. Either way, he wasn't going to be making any public appearances online anytime soon. Ganix was now alone. In late January 2019, Zammis began his hearing at Blackfriars Crown Court in London. He pled guilty. Appearing alongside him was our old friend Thomas Hounsel. Of the two, Zammis looked to be in far deeper trouble. For starters, dude got arrested for hacking while on bail for hacking. On top of that, he'd uploaded malware on Microsoft servers and stolen over 2,000 usernames and passwords from Nintendo's. Zammis had been astonishingly lucky to survive his prior legal rodeos. Now he needed a miracle far more divine than all the ones he'd received yet. Though we don't know what precisely happened during Zammis's trial, what we do know is that his defense relied heavily on his autism. In particular, his fixation on hacking was likened to an addiction by his defense barrister. However, one detail seemed most important to the judge: a letter from Zammis's parents. In it, they detailed not only his struggles with autism, but a plan for rehabilitation. This included his mom quitting her day job in order to supervise him, in what was likely the most embarrassing moment of his life. On March 28th, Zammis would learn his fate. Zammis would be sentenced to 15 months in prison. 18 months suspended. Looks like he had one last miracle in him after all. If he didn't reoffend for 18 months, he could avoid prison entirely. In addition, he received a Serious Crime Prevention Order, or SCPO, lasting 5 years. Hounsel would be similarly spared, receiving 6 months suspended for 18, along with 100 hours of community service. According to Ganix, Zammis wouldn't be able to use a computer unsupervised for the next 5 years. This would perhaps explain why even after his sentencing, he would not return to the internet. Though it is worth noting that Zammis would return to Mastodon on November 4th, 2022, quite a bit earlier than the projected 5 years. The same day Zammis was sentenced, the story hit the press. Some of his usernames were now publicly associated with the hack, which could be directly tied back to his GCL account. Despite this, the community was still unsure of what had happened. Who did find these articles was Ganix, who still had in his possession the files that had nearly gotten his friend imprisoned. Ganix had not given away everything he had. But was it safe to leak these files anymore? Was it even ethical now that he knew for certain where they'd come from? Ganix's actions in the following months are contradictory. One moment, he'll tease people as Mura about all the beta information he has. The next, the stress of it all is so overwhelming he starts venting to people behind the scenes. Then it's right back to leaking a debug ROM on TCRF and bragging about all the protos he has. To make matters worse, people on VP were beginning to put 2 and 2 together. And then there's Marcus, if you remember him from the Spaceworld situation. On October 29th, Marcus, who evidently knew a few things behind the scenes, confirmed in a thread that Zammis was the source of the Gen 1 leak, the same one that Ganix had helped out with. A friend of Ganix's, Photon Phoenix, would write at a later date, quote, "Ganix chose to tell me everything months ago for some reason, and I watched his psyche degrade as the facade wore thin, as facts and logic drew on about how Zammis Clark was the one who hacked the assets." Imagine you own some of the most prized beta content in all of fiction. The stress is getting to you. The pit in your stomach has been growing for a while now, and it's threatening to swallow your soul up too. A rotten, acidic sort of anxiety feels like it's rising through your spinal cord and eating at your brain. And yet, you also feel proud. You own something almost no one else has ever seen, something you weren't even meant to see to begin with, and you can go down in the history books forever, if only you release it. What do you do? The answer is quite simple, really. You never had a choice to begin with. The cascade has been in motion for so long now, it doesn't matter what you do. This proto is coming out one way or another, or 4 billion ways after that. Because sometimes, all it takes to destroy the world is to ride your bike the wrong way. A thread is posted to VP. Quote, "Hey VP, check out these silly sprites! Haha!" With it is a link to weavile.used.surf that, when clicked, reveals a comparison table with hundreds of beta sprites from Gen 4 next to their final versions. Though it contained no betamons, what it did have was cut gender differences for nearly every single Pokemon in the game. Immediately, Perceptive Anons noticed that used.surf was also Rhydon.used for the Gen 1 leak. This tie to helixchamber caused some to immediately doubt its validity, recalling the pokethon incident. However, a thread helixchamber posted about the leak indicated that they had nothing to do with it. So, who was behind this leak? People wouldn't have to wait long to find out. An anonymous user posted in all caps, quote, "Give us the ROM, smelly foot fa-" Attached was a conspiracy theory-like image connecting Ganix to the used.surf domain through rather convoluted means, which also involved exposing that he was a furry. The post was not only dripping with spite, but seemed oddly prepared for a thread that was posted less than 4 hours prior. Though much of the following would be removed by VP moderators, Anons would begin trawling through his social media, publicly associating their contents with the leak. Soon after, Ganix would take the page down, and instead was a lengthy write-up. He claimed that an anonymous source had given him the files through an app called Tox. However, this is a lie. What's likely true, however, is the next part. Quote, "I decided to make that comparison table I had up here for a few months so I could more easily compare them. Someone I initially gave it to posted the link on VP recently, and a few users have been going out of their way to find the source. I read over the thread, and while most people expressed interest in or enjoyed the sprite table, I'll be taking it down to prevent any further harassment and to stop those who are trying to uncover the source, which will result in the exact opposite of what those people want." It's been theorized that the person who created the image linking Ganix to used.surf is the same one who posted the sprites, but this is not known for certain. Over the following days, Ganix did some soul-searching. Though we can only speculate as to what this looked like, we do know the conclusion he came to. On the night of Christmas 2019, Ganix wrote what may be the single most infamous post on GCL, clarification on recent events. Okay, so I haven't exactly been upfront or honest with everyone, and I want to explain the situation and clear up any confusion and ambiguity behind things. Back in March of 2018, an individual hacked into Nintendo's internal network. That individual goes by many names online, but the one relevant here is Wacko. In May of 2018, Wacko uploaded the Spaceworld 1997 prototype of Pokémon Gold and Silver. There were many Pokémon-related things Wacko had come into possession of. He entrusted some of what he had with certain individuals. I was one of those people. I was careful not to include any actual data from the game or any game assets, but rather interpretations of those assets, such as including the back sprites as PNG files instead of the actual files that the game used for back sprites. In summary, the Pokemon Red and Green assets and the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl sprites are real. I have nothing else in my possession, and I've shown everything I did have. I deeply apologize for letting this go on for as long as it has. I haven't felt right about this from the very beginning, and it's a burden I'm finally glad to rid myself of. I've withdrawn from the dev/proto scene entirely, and I've recused myself from actively participating in the Pokemon Gen 1 through 7 glitching scene. Additionally, both Wacko and myself will be stripped of any and all ranks on GCL following this announcement, although I still plan to remain active and participate participate however I can. Again, I didn't plan for things to get this out of hand or cause negativity of any kind. I wanted to give people a glimpse of what could have been, and the amount of work and detail that went into some of these in any way I could. But even acknowledging their existence may have been saying too much, and I sincerely apologize for all of this. The GCL community was stunned. Immediately, Ganix began answering questions in the Discord. Though nobody seemed particularly upset with Ganix, his own opinion on the situation had crystallized. Ganix believed that what he'd done was immoral. Across various messages he wrote, quote, "All of it was nefariously obtained, regardless of how cool it is. Hell, even with how cool I myself think it is. It's my job to protect these companies from intrusion and attack, so I can't view Zammis's hack as anything but terrible, careless, and reckless as a security professional." He would even go as far as directly asking the Internet Archive to exclude weevil.used.surf, which they later did. Ganix felt he needed to atone, and this was his method. Soon, his clarification would ripple all across the Pokémon prototype community. The most chaotic of these effects would occur in none other than Pret, the server where Spaceworld was leaked all that time ago. Racy had accused Marcus of doxing Ganix. Quote, "At Marcus, is that why you threw Ganix under the bus with those docs to VP? It's just real funny that someone name-dropping Marcus who types exactly like Marcus would suddenly dox Ganix in the VP Gen 4 sprites thread, with info only someone close to the source would know, including Discord screenshots." To be clear, she's talking about the original post linking Ganix to the used.surf domain here. Others in chat ask Racy to substantiate her claims, but her only justification was that his typing voice matched certain anons on VP. But the situation would grow even more tumultuous when a user named AX6 joined chat. AX6 had previously expressed doubts about the Gen 1 leak in helixchamber's comments section, citing how various details of the files didn't seem to make sense, specifically citing how some of the maps had incorrect tile sets, rendering them indecipherable. Now, he had picked up on something fishy in Ganix's clarification, namely, that Ganix had lied. AX6 shares a screenshot where he quotes two statements Ganix made. One, that Ganix refused to share original assets, instead only sharing interpreted assets. Two, that he had nothing else in his possession, and shared everything he did have. AX6 writes, quote, "Those two phrases are not consistent with each other. One of them must be a lie." Racy responds, quote, "The stuff we were given was compiled assets. We were not given raw assets. That's what the post means." They go back and forth for some time, arguing about the validity of the Gen 1 leak. Racy talks around what the source of the assets were, though admits that they're not from a ROM. If you recall, at this point in the story, helixchamber's explanation is still that the assets are from a few prototype ROMs, which Racy has just admitted was a lie. AX6 responds, "So there was a source with real data, and not the fake maps with wrong tile sets we got. Apparently there was some source, we didn't get it, but this guy gave us everything he had." At most, two of those three phrases can be true at once. Racy replies, "Yes, because source would have been more dangerous to drop, so the compiled data was dropped instead. So the part about giving us everything he had is the lie. I mean, it doesn't exist now, so it's not a lie. Either he had it or he didn't. It's a boolean. There are no other options. Had and destroyed after everything of note was extracted/compiled." But AX6 evidently had a grudge, and Ganix's response was the final straw. Okay, so he didn't come clean. He kinda forgot to say that he had more to give, but he chose to destroy it instead. I'm sick of the constant lies and half-truth. Data either exists or it doesn't, and people either have it or they don't. Racy counters, people are mad that we released stuff, mad that we didn't release enough stuff. The fact that it's a miracle anything came out at all after 2 decades is apparently irrelevant. People are mad about the fact that you changed your story 21,401,924,908 times, and you still claim nothing bad happened. Should I remind you that this all started with you people stealing money from Twitch viewers? If people didn't want to donate, they didn't have to. I'm real sorry that they benefited disaster relief a little in between doxing our attendees and calling me slurs in the chat. People wanted to donate to see more beta content, as you promised. Instead, you showed them content you made up. But Racy wasn't backing down. I noticed we had 8,300 viewers and no donations, so I made up an incentive on the fly that people might want to see. At that point, most people thought it was a hack anyway. AX6 wouldn't relent either. You lied. Please understand that. You claimed that something was true while it wasn't. That's really the core of the issue. You people have been telling us lies and half-truths all along. At this point, the others in chat were firmly against Racy. AX6 continues. Are you incapable of making a mistake? Have you refunded the fraudulent donations? Literally 0 people have asked for their $5 or whatever back, so I'm completely serious here though. Is it so hard for you to acknowledge that you've lied to us all throughout? Not you specifically really. I'm extremely disappointed in the team in general, but you, specifically you can't even seem to acknowledge what happened. Like, we can't even debate if it was good or bad, if it mattered or it didn't, because we're still debating the facts. We're all staring at a green cup in the middle of the room, but you're calling it a blue fork. We can't even get to the point of whether the data was more or less important than the lies, because you won't acknowledge that the lies happened, and continue to happen. In the end, AX6's suspicions about the Gen 1 leak's authenticity would prove false, but it was becoming clear that, among certain parties, the situation was growing untenable. AX6 would later call helixchamber and ganix, quote, irredeemable hoarders with zero sense of giving back to the community. He also openly suspected helixchamber of hoarding more data behind the scenes. On the other side of the coin, Racy would later apologize to Marcus for her false accusation, which he accepted without reservation. Meanwhile, Ganix got in contact with a lawyer. He said in a Discord known as Hall of Origin, quote, my little stunt with releasing things could be tried under the Economic Espionage Act of 1996, which carries a $500,000 fine and 10 years in jail for each instance. Shortly after, he urged members of Team Spaceworld to delete everything Zammis had given them. As 2020 began, the state of Pokémon leaks was uncertain. Both sources no longer had anything to give, even though Zammis had stolen so much more than what had been revealed thus far. The community had to ask themselves, would they ever see a leak like Spaceworld 97 again? But see, 1997 isn't the only Spaceworld that had a Gen 2 Pokémon demo. The next Spaceworld event was held in 1999, and it had its own Gold and Silver demo which had yet to leak. But the Pokémon proto community had already seen so much chaos. Could they really handle another leak like this? On May 8th, 2019, when Ganix was answering questions on VP while posing as Mura, an anonymous user claimed that they possessed 2.5 terabytes worth of prototype content. Their source for this claim? Their ass. It's 4chan, what do you expect? They told an extremely convoluted and angsty story about how they're literally waiting for certain people to die before posting some of the data, and how they were going to give the spiciest development dump in history to 3 people, and blah blah. It was a hoax, and an obvious one at that. And yet, of all the misinformation perpetuated about the Zammis Clark story, the rumor that has withstood the test of time the longest is the idea that he stole 2.5 terabytes of data. You can't escape this rumor. Consume nearly anything about the story and you'll be given this figure.
While the amount of data stolen by Clark is unspecified in the articles written about him, it's common knowledge in the community that he obtained approximately 2 terabytes worth of information.
Because despite being one of the most blatant hoaxes ever conceived, one part of it rang eerily prophetic in retrospect. Check back sometime around mid-2020. Clean room design is a legal defense for projects attempting to reverse engineer machine-ready code back into the programming language the source code was written in. It means that the project was made with no knowledge of the original copyrighted source code. But aside from its utility as a legal defense, clean room can also be maintained either for the sake of morality or pride. If the source was obtained illegally, a project may have moral qualms with accessing it, or in cases like glitch hunting, knowledge of the source code can vastly ease the discovery of new glitches. Thus, maintaining clean room can increase the challenge and satisfaction. Up to this point, clean room was a given in the Pokémon community. The source code for the games had never been made public, so it was impossible to have knowledge of it to begin with. But if the source code for any Pokémon game were to come out, it would prove devastating for any clean room project surrounding it. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that, right? On March 18th, 2020, an anonymous user posted to VP, quote, "I found a USB stick in my uncle's drawer and took it without him noticing. He works at Nintendo, I hope he's not mad." He then posted an anon files link leading to a passworded file containing much of what Ganix and Zammis had leaked privately to Team Spaceworld, including the blue and yellow debug ROMs among other miscellaneous files. However, the thread would gain little traction. That same day, on the Hall of Origin Discord server, a user named Merp would ping Ganix. Quote, "So, someone mentioned something about you and Gen 4 ACE. I'm the Gen 3 ACE person, and I was thinking of trying to research 4. So like, what's the deal?" Over 2 years ago, Ganix was excited to discover arbitrary code execution in Gen 4. When he was given the source code by Zammis, he was able to find multiple methods through which ACE may be achievable. Now, Merp wanted him to disclose what he knew about these methods, but Ganix found himself unable to. Quote, "But yeah, no, I'm not disclosing any ACE vectors. I found that information by analyzing something I shouldn't have ever seen. And you bet your ass that I'm not going to divulge tainted info." Merp responds, "Yeah, the cool guy who had all the access in the world to these tools, which wasn't even legal access, and then hoards knowledge rather than sharing it with the scene." The argument continues for some time. Merp says, quote, "Like, someone else is eventually going to find the ACE vector without the source." Ganix says, "And I encourage that." Okay, but you're literally having people redo months of unnecessary work. But soon, the argument reached a boiling point, as Ganix posted a shocking paragraph. Yes, I know the answers, and I also know the scrapped Pokémon, the debug asserts, the dev comments, the shelved ideas, literally everything. And you know what? That's all they are now. They're just numbers. Gen 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all just code and data to me. There's nothing there that I used to enjoy now. I can force myself to be ignorant of everything and just experience it, but the magic isn't there anymore. There's way more there than should have ever been seen, and I legitimately regret that shit. Nobody but the devs and publisher should see that. 10 days later, the Team Spaceworld files would leak once more to 4chan, but without the password. This time, it would not go unnoticed. Ganix discussed the leak in the Glitch City Laboratories Discord, confirming both that the leak was real and that Team Spaceworld had withheld the files from public release for some time. He was pissed. Quote, "Team Spaceworld are a bunch of fucking children in my eyes at this point. I'm glad I jumped ship, and I'm damn glad I didn't give them anything else aside from that, or this could have been very bad. This guarantees I become a locked box though. Trust for people was already at 0, and now this ain't doing any favors." The last post was especially confusing, as Ganix had already resolved not to leak anything else. When another user asked why the leak shouldn't have gone public, Ganix wrote the phrase that he would soon become synonymous with. "It's bad data. Some Anons on VP were lurking in the GCL Discord, and upon seeing this, none were happy. What made the discussion on 4chan even more heated was that the leak contained one screenshot that had been shared in the Team Spaceworld Discord of a prototype Pearl ROM. Upon seeing the leak, Ganix posted a new screenshot from the same prototype in GCL, supposedly as proof of the leak's legitimacy, implying that he still had access to the Pearl proto. In addition, he admitted to withholding the Gen 1 source code, which had still not leaked. To VP, Ganix had lied about deleting everything from his computer. He had protos to spare and none to share. In response, VP Anons began scouring his Safe for Work and NSFW Twitter accounts, both of which Ganix shortly privated. The phrase bad data would swiftly become a meme used by 4chan to deride Ganix. At the end of it all, Ganix wrote, quote, "I really am sorry. Y'all don't need to be dealing with this kind of thing on my behalf. I said a thing, then someone mentioned it somewhere else, and now we're here. And I never should have said the thing to begin with. I know a bunch of shit has been stirred recently just from me even acknowledging anything, and that it would put the negative spotlight on GCL on at least 2 occasions now, and I don't want that to happen here again." Immediately after, Ganix would leave the GCL Discord. But the Team Spaceworld leaks wouldn't end there. Beginning on March 31st, an Anon would begin posting screenshots and messages shared in the private Discord, including images from Gen 2 development ROMs and messages where Zammis admitted to having the Spaceworld 99 demo. This would be interpreted by some to mean that Team Spaceworld was hoarding the 99 demo, though this was inaccurate. In response to all this, Sanqui would officially disband Team Spaceworld, privating the entire server's message history along with it. Quote, "There is nothing left to be done here but drama and nothing to leak but personal information. If you want specific technical information from the historical logs, please ask me. Thanks for the effort 2 years ago. It was a hectic but great time. I politely request the person who is bent on sharing logs from this Discord to consider redacting users, as there are people who would prefer to keep their involvement in this project private for personal reasons. Thanks." Team Spaceworld was officially dead, having never released the planned translation patch. On April 1st, 2020, helixchamber posted their article, Red and Green Proto Move Analysis, Part 1, Mirror Move. The site would go dormant for an entire year before returning with a Part 2 on June 3rd, 2021. This would end up being the site's final article. Though technically a year off, helixchamber's death was well into motion. Their reputation would forever be inseparable from Pokethon. After some kerfuffle, an internal list of every ROM on most Nintendo platforms was leaked to 4chan, but that was only a warning shot for what would come next. April 11th would start with a fairly minor leak, debug ROMs for Gold and Silver, which were most likely passed around in private between some Team Spaceworld members, though never posted on the server. But only an hour and a half later, on the same thread, a different Anon would post, quote, "Solve the challenge and enjoy. This where lots of helixchamber shit came from," along with an Anon files link. The password was quickly cracked, and the files were revealed to be source code for the US ROMs of Pokémon Blue and Yellow, the same source code that Ganix had gotten the back sprites from. Though many secrets were found in the code, the one that captured people the most was a planned companion game to Pokémon Yellow called Pokémon Pink, the mascot of which would likely have been Clefairy. A helixchamber member would later claim that they knew about Pokémon Pink well before the source code leak, but had withheld this knowledge from the public because there, quote, "wasn't much to work with." At this point, it had become clear that helixchamber, Ganix, and Team Spaceworld had all legitimately hoarded either data or knowledge to varying extents. However, this fact was taken by VP to weave tall tales about how any combination of the 3 parties were hoarding apparently untold quantities of protos from the public. These theories were lent credibility by the fact that at this point, many unleaked materials were known to exist, compiled into a supposed mass master list by one anon. Threads about beta Pokemon were now increasingly preoccupied with irate ramblings about hoarders. The primary target of this hatred was none other than Ganix. One post that captures the sentiment of the time reads, quote, "People that do this are irrational. They do not care about things like history, greater good, etc., and will continue to destroy valuable, one-of-a-kind things if it means anyone other than themselves can enjoy it. You need to understand that these people are egotistical and irrational. They don't have the morals or beliefs people like us do." On VP, Ganix was public enemy number 1, and his actions soon following would only worsen this perception. On April 24th, an anon on VP posted a Go file link, simply writing, "Enjoy." What lay behind that link was arguably the biggest leak thus far. If it had just contained the Gen 2 source code and localizations, it would have been exciting. If it had just contained Spaceworld 99 and all of its beta Pokemon, it would have been insane. If it had just contained hundreds of gold and silver development builds, it would have been nearly unfathomable. But on top of all that, it had an internal backup containing some of the most bizarre beta Pokemon sprites to date. Gen 2's development had been torn right open in a way no other Pokemon game had. All that, plus an official Game Boy emulator made by Nintendo. Also, shout out to Beta Celebi from this leak. She's adorable, and I want to see some love for her in the comments. If you call her Cancer Bee, I'll never forgive you. On Hall of Origin, people were discussing the leak, when Ganix would post a series of shocking screenshots. He would write, quote, "Get old pics. Posting this here for completeness. They're all deleted from my computer. Here's what you can probably look forward to though if you're into all this leak stuff." He then posted screenshots of both Mystery Dungeon and Fire Red Leaf Green debug ROMs, as well as folders on a computer relating to Pokemon Ranger. He would later delete these screenshots. Many months later, Sankui would clarify, quote, "The screenshots he posted were the same screenshots Riley, zammis, had made and shared with me, so I believe Ganix didn't have the actual files, just those exact screenshots," and he explained himself poorly. In all likelihood, everything of substance Ganix was given had been leaked, aside from Gen 4 source code, and he really had deleted everything zammis had given him. The same held true for Team Spaceworld and helixchamber. Despite this, through over a year of bad blood, miscommunication, and a bit of hoarding, VP would not soften towards them. From here on out, the pace of leaks becomes so rapid that mentioning them all is untenable. By this point, they've become so common that a meme begins about how leaks are supposedly scheduled every Friday. Some highlights include a Mew event trading ROM for the 3DS Virtual Console, Gen 7 Pokemon debug ROMs, and N64 tech demos, though that's barely scraping the surface. Most of the leaks up to a certain point had been met with some skepticism, but now the amount of effort it would take to fake the leaks had become so Herculean that few doubters remained. In response to someone asking if the Spaceworld 99 leak was real, an anon writes, quote, "I faked it. I reverse engineered the gold, silver, and crystal source code and intentionally made the priv ramming super incompetent as a joke. I then proceed to do that 600 more times with very minor tweaks to the translation also as a joke. I then wrote code by ERRATA that wasn't incompetent as a joke. I also made a new bad Game Boy emulator as a joke. I then drew hundreds of sprites ranging from barely started to completely finalized and wrote dex entries and fake moves for everything as a joke. And I did this in 6 languages as a joke. You all fell for it. It immediately becomes a copy pasta." On May 18th, the Gen 3 source code leaked. The next day, Sankui announces in Pret that Clean Room is dead. Just 4 days later, the Gen 4 source code followed suit. The source code for all of the first 4 Pokemon games was now publicly available. And then, the big one. On July 24th, what may very well be the most infamous leak in gaming history happened. The CVS repository for Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, containing the source code for not just one, but multiple development builds of the games. Beta Pokémon for Gen 4, the original files that Ganix had found the gender differences in, source code and prototypes for SNES games, including Yoshi's Island, F-Zero, and Star Fox 2. Cancelled plans for a Pokémon MMO, the demo for the cancelled game Super Donkey, and much more. Immediately, 4chan users knew they had to document everything in this leak. A Google Doc was started by someone going by the Frozen Star to compile research. At the top of the doc, they decided to give the leak a name, one that would go down in history: the Gigaleak, or rather, the Nintendo Gigaleak. The Nintendo Gigaleak was so massive that every peripheral detail was forgotten. The fact that the name started from this specific document is barely known to begin with. Even more shocking is the presence of 2 words on the original Nintendo Gigaleak post: fuck Ganix. Once upon a time, there was the Nintendo Gigaleak. The next day, there was the Gigaleak 2. And from there, it was an entire era of near-constant leaks for various Nintendo games, up until the end of 2020. Then, on July 20th, 2021, the post-Gigaleak era had one last hurrah, with the final major batch of 10 leaks in one day, all on the same thread. To some people, the story begins precisely here on July 24th, 2020, probably as a hazy, half-remembered ordeal. If you're lucky, maybe they'll remember that Zammis Clark did the hack instead of Ryan Rocks. No, really, Zammis is the unluckiest person on Earth. The fact that he's constantly confused with a sex offender is a worse punishment than his SCPO. Ryan only got the middle 2 of those letters, and even if they correctly tell you Zammis was the hacker, they'll probably tell you he had 2.5 terabytes. I mean, at least Ryan probably did. Not of Nintendo games, though. But staring people right in the face the whole time were those 2 words. Fuck Ganix. 2 words born from months of spite that have been all but forgotten. Yet all you need to do to discover the story is to ask yourself one question. Who's Ganix? And from there, you just need to let the clock rewind. Eventually, you'll find yourself back on March 18th, 2006. On that day, Zammis registered his account on a little-known website called Glitch City Laboratories. 14 years later, he would help kill it. According to Abwayax, he had been making plans to give up his role as GCL's head admin potentially as early as 2012. However, this wouldn't come to fruition until April 2nd, 2019. Abwayax would become just another member of the site, though maintained his role as web host. 2 head admins would take his place, Torchickens and Photon Phoenix. But this wasn't the only upheaval going on behind the scenes in GCL at this time. The year prior, some staff members had been demoted for inactivity, as well as one being demoted for behavioral reasons. Over the following year, at least 2 staff members would be banned, including Zammis. In the replies to a GCL post regarding the other staff members' ban, a user would write, "Is there something I missed, or are we just hemorrhaging members?" Perhaps this was written in part because 5 days prior, Photon Phoenix announced he would be taking an extended hiatus. On February 26th, Torchickens would step down from head admin, writing that she felt unsafe after the recent bans of controversial members and the scrutiny the site was receiving thanks to Ganix and Zammis. This meant that the site's one remaining head admin was on hiatus, and according to Torchickens' post, still largely inactive. Because of all this, it would be unfair to claim that Zammis was the sole reason why GCL died, but his role in it was undeniable. On July 12th, 2020, Photon Phoenix would upload a post to GCL entitled, "See you, Space Cowboy." It read, Quote, in an effort to preserve the 16 years of cleanroom research on GCL following the source code leaks of the first 4 generations of Pokemon games, we will be reverting the wiki to March 31st on the affected articles. Additionally, the wiki will then be completely locked, archived, and exported to a format that is easily importable to a fresh MediaWiki installation. 2 weeks after the archival, the forums will also be locked and archived. On July 31st, the current Discord will remain open. However, the current on-topic channels will be archived. The purpose of the Discord as a glitch research area effectively derailed, and the ownership handed off. The goal of this process is to allow a new community to form in GCL's place. Since the source codes were leaked, any new contributions to the first 4 generations Pokemon games, and to an extent Generation 5, would always carry a risk that the contributor would be providing tainted data by reading from the source code themselves, rather than accepting this fact, allowing this data to intermingle with our research from the last 16 years, it was decided to pass along our work to any community willing to continue it, with the knowledge that any further contributions would always come from dubious origins. This is the end of operations of Glitch City's Laboratories. However, this is the beginning of the greater Glitch City metropolis. Abouyax himself would add to the post, citing burnout and mental health issues among staff members as another leading cause of the site's death. The replies were mixed. Some people didn't understand why the site needed to shut down because of Zammis and Ganix's mistakes. Others wrote emotionally about their fond memories on GCL, and how it forever changed the course of their lives. As if the universe itself was laughing at them, a mere 12 days after this post, the Nintendo Gigaleak happened, making even more source code for Gen 4 public. On September 1st, 2020, both the wiki and forum for Glitch City Laboratories went offline. In its place, a static HTML dump remains, an archive carved into the annals of internet history. But with the death of one site, another was born. Nowadays, glitchcity.wiki carries on the torch of GCL, continuing 2 decades of research, even considering how messy the room is now. The GCL Discord too has been archived, in its place giving way to the Glitch City Research Institute server, currently owned by Hunter in the Dark. For now, however niche and however much turmoil the community has been through, Glitch City survives. After 2021, new leaks resulting from Zammis's Nintendo hack slowed to a mere trickle. Most recently, on or around December 23rd, 2024, an IQ email dump thought to be from the hack was leaked, but it seems that nearly everything Zammis pilfered has been released by now. Gone are the days of hoarding. There is scant left to hoard. On August 5th, 2024, Zammis Clark joined the Glitch City Research Institute Discord server under the name Ryrie. His internet history was no longer monitored, and his SCPO had expired earlier that year. He came bearing a remote code execution for Ultra Sun and Moon. He writes, quote, I know people suggested I should join the Discord, but I seriously feel like someone would ban me for my role in the death of GCL, lol. Like, I don't really want to register for the wiki either, even though I should, just to document that RCE exists in Gen 6 through 7. But despite everything, few people seem to hold a grudge, or even name the situation to him all that often. To this day, Zammis remains in Glitch City Research Institute, where he posts on a somewhat regular basis. Though he's as obsessed with web security and technology as he ever was, for the time being, it seems like Zammis's illegal hacking days are behind him. Perhaps me giving the simple leaking of gaming protos such a supernatural mystique as the Cascade is cheesy or corny or cringy or any number of things. But to me at least, it feels fitting. Because at the end of it all, with everyone freed from the Cascade's grasp, I, and perhaps those involved with the story as well, can't help but sit here in amazement wondering, how the hell was so much chaos caused by just a few pixels? If you liked this video and want to support more insane research projects like this, consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks.